Hi, I'm Richard Ward, and I just want to take some time to give some ideas to what needs to be taken into account when you are cutting stone with a water jet. We've had a couple of people ask us, hey, what things should I be thinking about? What are some of the things that can be done? So this is going to be raw footage, no fancy editing. I'm sure plenty of mistakes and grammar errors, but if you take the time to look at it, hopefully you get some of what I've learned over the years of doing stone. We did a lot of stone for many years, inlays, kitchen counters, try to be creative about things that you can do with a water jet and how to generate income from a water jet cutting stone, when there are of course other ways to cut stone more effectively or more cost effectively for less, but of course not achieve the same end goal. So I might jump around a little bit, but and we'll try to break it up in a few sections so you don't all fall asleep, but feel free to watch it, and for those who've specifically asked for this, hopefully it helps and you can use it with your team of people to get them enthusiastic about it as well. Okay, the great thing about a water jet is that whether you are cutting a straight line or cutting some kind of design, the water jet often doesn't know if it's really doing one or the other. So when we used to price water jet cutting, and I had a stone company, whenever I priced a straight cut, I would always try to take into account what it cost to do this just with a normal bridge saw. And I knew that if I was going to go and sell an island that was a rectangle, I could do it with a bridge saw, and anybody else could do it with a bridge saw even in their garage and probably do an excellent job, and it would be certainly whatever it cost to do the bridge saw. You could go and get something from the Home Depot and get the right blade and just chop it up in your garage. Well, how do you justify a water jet to do that? And I think the answer is you can't. And even if you used the cost of the water jet to cut that out, and you took your total cost and divided it into an hour or per inch or whatever you're doing, it's going to be really tough to justify that. Now bear in mind that when I first got into water jet cutting of stone, the only machine we had was a water jet. I never had a bridge saw to start with. So I had to be able to go and do any kind of work in the stone industry, and everything you come across, from fireplaces to walls to flooring, countertops, and I was using a water jet to do the straight, and I was doing a water jet to do maybe my sink cutouts and whatever else might happen. The way I priced it is, I would say, well, that's a straight cut, so this is what it would cost me to do this with a bridge saw. And so I'm going to price the square or the straight line cutting as a bridge saw. But of course, as soon as I come to a cutout for a sink, if I didn't have a water jet, I would then rather look at the time that it took to do that, maybe by hand, or if a guy's got an angle grinder, whatever it is, try to drill those holes out or core the holes out, whatever the point would be. And then I would use those numbers again for the pricing, but suddenly now I could do it with a water jet for substantially less. And so whereas I might lose on the straight line cuts, I might start to score on the sink cutouts. Of course, the thing that I really tried hard to do was to convince every customer that they should maybe be doing something a little different with their kitchen counter or island, and that way, if I could put a bit of a radius here, put something there, do something in the corners, maybe do an undercut. Very difficult to do that by hand. Now when you're doing an outside arc, but when you're doing an inside arc, it suddenly becomes quite a lot tougher. My cost to do that with the water jet was the same as it was to do the rectangle. But suddenly now I can charge a lot more for this because anybody else has to do it by hand. If they do it by hand, they have to come and do a lot of finishing work, a lot of polishing, a lot of cleanup, and their cost is going to go right through the roof. My cost is exactly the same. So the goal would be to try and get as many opportunities as possible to get somebody to add some kind of feature to whatever it is that you're cutting that lends itself to the capabilities of a Waterjet. Suddenly, instead of maybe paying, and I'm just making these numbers up, instead of paying maybe $1,000 for a rectangular, I might be able to charge $3,000 for something that's customized. I might even be able to come along and put some kind of inlay in here and use this piece to inlay in that, and suddenly now I can maybe get $4,000 and my cost didn't really change. It's the same material, just got the skills of the Waterjet. So that is one of the primary ways and the primary focuses as a manufacturer of kitchen counters or anything like that. We always tried to get people to see that they could do so much more than think in straight lines. You see a lot of people put really fancy shapes on the outside. That's the goal. Something else that of course the Waterjet lends itself to, and that is that you might have a slab of granite or marble, whatever it is, and you maybe have a kitchen counter that's going to come out like this, and then you might have a couple of backsplashes. You might be able to sneak one in there, you might be able to sneak that one out there, maybe not, maybe you can. Have a sink cut out, and you might have a few other things that you got to come along and put in. But you can, of course, the great thing with the Waterjet is that you can nest your parts effectively together, and as a result get a whole lot more out of the slab of granite. So if I was cutting this with a bridge saw, it would be tough. And in fact it might determine where your joints might be. You might find that you'll end up putting a joint in your counter right there because that's the easiest way for the bridge saw. Again, you have a challenge with your backsplash. With the Waterjet, you suddenly are free. You're free to think about anything as to how you're going to do this, and you're free to be super creative in offering something that people just cannot get. And just because other people are already doing this doesn't mean that they think creatively. For example, what we became masters at, and you can see a lot of photographs on the stone section on our website, but we might say, okay, let's say that this slab was too big to put into the room. We would always try and take our joint, and instead of being in an obvious place, offset it. Instead of being a straight line, give it a little bit of a shape. That way your eye cannot pick it up, and people walk in here, people will pick up a straight line. As soon as you see that straight line, your eye's going to see it. Do something in an obscure place, your eye doesn't look for it, it doesn't notice it, and give it a little bit of a curve, and suddenly it's almost lost. We used to do things that were even more amazing, and that is that we might come along and put some kind of inlay in different materials, but even then you might find that your eye would typically want to follow through to where your shape was and carry it through and project it to the outside. So what we would do, and I still love this, is I would take maybe my joint and it might look like this, for example. We would cut the red part out of different material. We would cut, of course, the opening here. We would take, because this might have come from a different part of the slab. Then when we actually cut this groove, if it was two different pieces, we would do an offset, so that when it all came together, there was virtually no joint in here. We have a joint, of course, where you're going to put your stone and your inlay in. And we often inlay things like stainless steel, doesn't always have to be stone, you can inlay brass, different products, glass. And then we would do an offset so that they were almost perfect tight joints. Then we would take some stone, crush it up, mix it up with the kimi, put it in between the joint. When we put the whole thing back together, even have some stainless rods that we might stick underneath there, grout that in, use a kimi and actually put that in underneath. So we've reinforced the whole thing once it's inside or on the counters. Cleans up, polish it up in the field, and you landed up with an absolutely amazing piece of work. And the amount of time it took to do that was insignificant, and the value of this job just went through the roof. And you honestly are free to sort of charge however you feel. Now we would take that design and we might decide that we do some completely irrelevant or completely, doesn't even have to be consistent, where we again come and put some kind of inlay into the backsplash, and the same thing along here, whatever you wanted to do. But again, now you're taking that theme and you carry that theme through the backsplashes, and as a result you start to add incredible value to what everybody else is doing, using twice as much granite, using a bridge saw, taking straight cuts. You can do a common line cut here, you don't even have to do 2 cuts, you could do 1 common line cut. We even started doing things like using the Waterjet to put almost like a washboard. We would take the stone out, slice it up into pieces, which can even be wavy. We'd take some of it, hold it horizontal, take the rest of it at a slope, sandblast what was in the middle, and now you would have a simple drain where you start to put cups and plates on here. The water drained down into an undercut sink, and this was all out of the same stone. So you can see inlays, joints, how you bring them together, backsplashes, starting to do stuff with sinks, doing other inlays in different places. That's just on one piece of countertop. And as you add this, nobody else can compete unless they have a Waterjet cutting machine. So, just to encourage you, when we started in the stone business, which ultimately led to Waterjet, we never had a bridge saw at all. Our only method of cutting was a Waterjet. It was very old, it was very inaccurate, it was fraught with issues and problems because we took an old oxy-fuel machine and put it together. So it is nothing like the technology that you will have on a modern day Waterjet as far as size of files and that kind of thing. So here's the first introduction to what we're talking about, and if you still want to learn a bit more, have a look at the next one. Thanks.